This is Jacob Heilbrunn. I'm the editor of The National Interest and pleased to welcome my guest today, Greg Priddy, a senior fellow at the Center for the National Interest, for our podcast In the National Interest. Greg, first question is, was it actually in America's national interest to invade Venezuela and depose the authoritarian leader Nicolás Maduro?
My opinion is that I really don't see a compelling reason that we had to do this. This isn't solely an energy-related question, but taking down a sovereign government for the list of grievances that we had with them a week ago seems a bit of a stretch. And I think the energy case for it that we're talking about now is a pretty weak case.
Why?
On paper, you look at Venezuela's proven reserves, and they're the biggest in the world. But proven reserves can be kind of an uninstructive number. And what I mean by that is it doesn't say anything about the type of oil or the production cost. I mean, usually people counting reserves only include things that are considered economically producible, reserves that are within the boundaries of what the market might bear for production costs. But that doesn't really say much about where the market is today. And so, the point that I've made about this is the production costs at Venezuela for the heavy oil deposits are quite high, and the market is actually down and pretty well supplied right now. And so, in a nutshell, that the investment case for this is not as strong as it would have been, say, 20 years ago.
What about the nature of the oil? Essentially, we're talking about tar, aren't we, that has to be converted at the site. How is it converted? And then how would it be transferred to a state like Louisiana for further processing?
So the best way to do it is with upgraders, which is you have a plant that you build at the site where the oil is or close to it, where you take this viscous tar-like substance. You basically break down the molecules and rejigger it chemically to upgrade it to a hydrocarbon that will flow down a pipeline and go onto a tanker. The other way to do it is to dilute it with lighter oils. And that has been most of what Venezuela has been doing recently, since a lot of their upgraders are in disrepair, has been diluting it. That was part of the relationship with Iran. The reason Iran was useful to them was Iran was giving them a little bit of light crude that they could mix in with their heavy in order to make it suitable for export. But it's a very expensive process, and upgraders cost several $billion each to build. And that, it's something that takes a long time. And you would really have to be confident, to go to your board as an oil company CEO and make a case for building something like that there to, have a big increase in their capacity. You'd really have to be confident about the economics of that out 10 years plus from now, because most of your returns on it are going to be loaded out into the future. So it's a very long-term project. People have a lot of concerns about demand flattening out or maybe even declining, and a relatively low confidence level about where demand is going to be in the out years, given that a breakthrough in battery technology, let's say, might change that adoption curve for EVs pretty sharply. And the other thing that comes into play here is there are a lot of other places for oil companies to invest. So the best place to invest is something like, the Permian in Texas, where it may be somewhat high production cost, although not as high as Venezuelan heavy, but it's a low risk environment and it's a short cycle environment. So you can invest now and get oil out of the ground a year from now, less than a year from now, and you can adjust your capital expenditures up and down in response to market signals from prices in a way that you can't with these longer term projects.
Now, President Trump has been talking about running Venezuela for years in an interview with the New York Times. But Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago points out that this is, in his view, a pipe dream, so to speak, because who's going to provide the security for the American contractors working in this unstable environment?
Well, that's one reason alongside many reasons. Generally, the oil industry does not do business in places that are that challenging from a security standpoint. In the past, you have had places like in Iraq and Yemen, when Nixon was there, where you had to have armed guards for people working on oil projects. But that has been the exception, not the rule. And again, with the market well supplied, there are good places to go invest and produce oil. So why go do that? Again, Trump is kind of taking a state capitalist approach to this, where the White House is thinking about what businesses should do, and the White House is thinking about what businesses should do and telling them what to do without fully understanding the business. So this is, there are people who've made state capitalism work reasonably well, China arguably, but this is like very ignorant, poorly thought out state capitalism.
President Trump will be meeting with the oil majors on Friday. What do you expect that meeting to be about? Substance or just PR?
I expect a lot of nodding and efforts to be polite and hear him out and say, you will think about it. And that's exactly the kind of meeting I think it's going to be. There's just so many drawbacks. I mean, one, we don't have boots on the ground. So we can pressure the Venezuelan regime, which is still the Chavista regime in power there. We have all these levers of pressure on them, but that is not going to create the kind of control that you would need to go in and say, okay, the U.S. controls this country. I have a stable environment to invest. And the other factor that comes into it when you think longer term, and this was the case, there's a reluctance, like there was in Iraq, to have contracts awarded to you on good terms that looks like you got those good terms at gunpoint, like you're robbing the host country. And as with Iraq, the industry is not going to want to do that because we don't know that the US government is going to be protecting that. The industry is going to look at this and say there are not going to be American military people doing this 6 years from now, 8 years from now. They're not going to be there forever. And so if it looks coerced, that's just going to set the seeds for your project to get, when that protection goes away, which is before your investment time frame ends, you're going to get undermined. You don't want assets that are good commercially, but look like you're stealing from the host country. That really looks bad.
Now, the Trump administration is saying that it can drive Venezuela into complete bankruptcy and that it is close to that and sees that as its form of leverage. However, is it really in the interest of the administration if Venezuela resists some of its demands to see the place go up in flames? It occurs to me that this leverage is more limited than the administration may be willing to acknowledge.
No, we control their seaborne trade, so we can shut down their sources of revenue. But trying to undermine Venezuela into it's already in a very powerless position economically. I don't see, they could do it, but that would create a whole set of other problems for the U.S., including migration flows, which has been a big issue for this administration. So you do that to them, you're going to have migrants trying to get out, and that would create its own set of problems.
So, final question, where do you think we're headed? Like, where are we in 2 or 3 weeks? Are we headed towards a civil war, or do you think there'll be some kind of mutual accommodation that'll be hammered out between Trump and the Venezuelan regime?
I'll answer that by saying my bailiwick is mainly energy and the Middle East. So I would not pretend to be an expert on Venezuela's domestic politics. But I think that the contradictions in this are going to become apparent. You may have some companies you could have some investment flowing back into repairing facilities that, say, Chevron has already talked about, putting a couple of $1 billion into getting their upgrader there restarted. And so you may have some investment flowing into getting things up and running that are not functional or degraded right now. But I don't think you're going to see people building new upgraders or taking on major new investments. So I think going forward, the oil production from there could go up a bit, but not much over 1 million barrels a day. It's a little under 800 right now, 800,000. But it's hard to see where this goes. If we don't want to actually occupy the country, we're going to find that, their leverage is going to be limited for exactly those reasons you outlined, because yes, we can make them a failed state, but that would backfire on us as well. So perhaps we will come to some sort of modus vivendi where we exercise some influence on them. We get them to do some things we want for American companies, But we don't have, what I'm pretty sure will not happen is a massive flood of tens of billions of dollars of investment in building new upgraders there. They're never going to get back to the 3.5 million barrels a day they were at in the late 90s.
Greg, modus vivendi or confrontation, we shall see in the coming weeks, and we'll have to have you back on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks.